Perfect. We'll start in just a minute here. Excited to see some people jumping on. And we're also connected to our Hidden Heroes community page right now. So those of us that are joining on Facebook Live, thank you so much for being here and for joining us today. I'm so excited. Okay, great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started while more people are joining in. First, I want to say good afternoon and welcome to everyone. My name is Jasmine Alfonso. I am the manager of City and Community Initiatives at the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. We are excited that you're able to join us for today's webinar series, the Caregiver Community Connection, C3, presented by the Elizabeth Dole Foundation and powered by our partners at the Wounded Warrior Project. Our goal is to bring military and veteran and family caregivers engaging content on important topics and provide opportunities for peer connection and support. We're also very pleased to have the support of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, who join us and partner in this series as well. And a huge thanks to our partners at Comcast NBC Universal for their support of the Elizabeth Dole Foundation's Hidden Heroes Cities and Counties program. Today's webinar, Building a Neighborhood, a Mayor's Journey to Reinvent Stockton, will feature Mayor Michael Tubbs of Stockton, California, and our very own California Dole Caregiver Fellow, Kelly Hunsucker. They will be engaging in a conversation of hope and exploring the passion that drives Mayor Tubbs. On today's episode, we will also learn why the mayor decided to support the Elizabeth Dole Foundation Hidden Heroes Cities and Counties program, and how the city of Stockton has become a leader in military and veteran caregiver supports. Mayor Michael Tubbs is the youngest mayor in American history to represent a city with more than 100,000 people, and his initiatives are sparking a local grassroots movement. Mayor Tubbs has been included in Fortune's top 40 under 40, Forbes' 30 under 30, and the Roots 100. Mayor Tubbs' leadership, paired with his ambitious agenda, has been nationally recognized. Before we get started, I want to mention to all of our attendees that this is a recorded broadcast. We have a lot to cover, but we'll take any questions at the end of the webinar. Be sure to submit any questions using the Q&A box that's located in the Zoom control panel. I will also be taking notes of any questions during the Q&A portion of today's programming. As an added bonus, we'll be selecting 4 winners during the episode. Today's winners will receive a $25 Amazon gift card and a Wounded Warrior Project journal. So good luck. For those of you that are joining on Facebook Live through our Hidden Heroes Caregiver community page, welcome. Please submit any questions you have by commenting on the Facebook video. A recording from today's webinar will also be available and shared from today's in an email. We will be starting by sharing a clip of Mayor Tubbs' TED Talk, The Political Power of Being a Good Neighbor. In this rousing talk, Mayor Tubbs shares how growing up amid poverty and violence in Stockton, California, shaped his bold vision for change and his commitment to govern as a neighbor, not only as a politician. When we see someone different from us, they should not reflect our fears, our anxieties, our insecurities. We should see our common humanity. A quote from Mayor Tubbs himself. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Kelly Hunsucker, the California Dole Caregiver Fellow, and Stockton Mayor Michael Tubbs.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. Welcome, Mayor Tubbs. I'm so grateful you were able to join us today.
Oh, thank you. And let me just brag and say, at the end of this interview, I'm sure everybody's going to sign Kelly to a television contract, but she'll be based in Stockton. She's from Stockton. She's a Stockton resident, and we're not going anywhere. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. That's very kind of you to say. Well, I wanted to start out today, kind of piggyback on the video that we just watched. You know, right now in America, we're seeing this the protests that are going on across the country, with the unjust killings of African Americans at the hands of police. I feel like we need to start out addressing some of this, and you talked about it in your video, some of the racism, the systemic inequality, injustice. And I find that we turn to our local leaders a lot for words of wisdom, and I'm wondering if you have anything you'd like to share with our community during this time so we can come together in solidarity.
Well, thank you for that. And I think particularly for the folks watching this conversation, folks who are veterans, or folks who are caregivers of veterans, folks who know intimately well the sacrifices that go into protecting what this flag stands for in terms of liberty and justice for all, and for all, we really mean for all, and understanding that even when we're not in a war or we're not in a foreign land, that oftentimes the real battle is at home and how we treat each other and how our institutions treat each other. And that's why this fight is so important. It's literally to honor the sacrifices that have been made. It's to honor what folks have lost limbs for and lost lives for. And it's this ideal of America, ideal of a place in this imperfect world that isn't perfect, that at least treats everyone the same. And in this moment, we just have to remember that's what even if we may not agree with all the methods, even if we wish that it wasn't so loud, we just have to really center ourselves on, we are all engaged collectively in a fight for the soul of our country, and to ensure that this flag still stands for what folks have fought for it to stand for many, many centuries. And I think caregivers and veterans are actually some of the best equipped people to lead that conversation, because of the immense personal loss and sacrifice that has gone in to fighting for the ideals that we stand for.
Yeah, I agree. I think, personally too, it brings a whole new meaning to fighting for our country and what we want our country to represent. And that, as you mentioned, that everyone is equal. And, the constant fight for that too doesn't just, it doesn't stop. It keeps going, and we have to keep pursuing it. With that in mind, it was really heartwarming to see the amount of people that came out in Stockton, one of the most diverse cities in America, and peacefully protested and made their voices heard, and exercised that civic duty to go out and to go say, this isn't right. This is what we want our voices to be heard. This is how we want them to be heard. Are there any actionable ways that you can think of that, that we can get involved and get out there and get our voices heard?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's several, particularly in this moment. So number one, there's a bill right now, the Justice and Policing Act, that doesn't solve every issue, but at least helps focus some of the conversation around what we know a baseline we should have in terms of policing in our community. So go support that act. Number two, at the local level, whether it's school board, whether it's city council, whether it's mayor, whether it's there's so many opportunities to either run for office or not run for office, to support folks who are running. And then number three, I think particularly because we're all at home, taking the time to educate ourselves on the issue, because I think there's so much passion and so much energy and so much of a willingness to do something. But I know in terms of sustainability, in terms of the length of time it's going to take to see some of these changes, that it's also a moment to really gird ourselves with information and taking the time to read and understand and to ask questions and to think, so that when it's time to act, we can act in a way that's actually aligned with what we want to see, is super helpful. I think, but also just having those conversations, particularly with family members. I know I tell people all the time, particularly some of my white friends who want to be allies and who want to be a part and want to fight, I say, well, if it was up to for black people to end racism, it would have been ended 400 years ago. There's never been a time in this country's history where we're like, okay, racism is cool. So I think having those conversations with people who may think they may think differently, who weren't at the protests, who don't understand, but are like good, and their hearts are good people. Having those conversations, I think, are so important, because what I've realized, particularly in being mayor of a city so diverse, is that people have different experiences, they have different perceptions of things, different understanding, and oftentimes people just don't have the information. or just don't know other experiences, or just don't understand what's happening. So I've learned that having a conversation, particularly with people I disagree with, has been helpful to kind of bring more growth. So I think everyone, if you talk to everyone will say, we want liberty and justice for all. And then when you say, okay, if that's the fact, then did you know there's not liberty and justice here? So to answer your question concisely, I think it's educating ourselves, having tough conversations, and continuing to amplify and speak to bills and laws that are aligned with what we're protesting for.
That's excellent. Thank you. You know, I would encourage everybody to go back and watch the full length of that TED Talk video because it's really phenomenal. And in it, you talk about how Stockton is a place where lots of times people go away to college or they leave and they don't come back. What made you want to come back and, you know, root back down in Stockton and get involved in politics here?
Yeah, I think, like, to your point, that was kind of my frame growing up, that Stockton, I loved Stockton, but I thought I would love it as a city I was from, but not that city that I lived in. And part of it was just because, like every city, there's challenges. There's real room for growth and improvement. And I decided to come back after going to college after, unfortunately, my cousin was murdered in Stockton. And it was in that moment of anger and rage and also feeling real helpless. It felt like, oh, nothing matters. It doesn't matter what I do. Let me just go make a lot of money. Let me just go and just care about myself because nothing's going to change. So why should I try to change it? In battling those thoughts, I realized that no, it's not guaranteed to be successful, but I actually do have the ability to be a part of changing it, to have some agency. And there's no guarantee it'll work, but at least I can say I tried. And that's when I decided to run for city council during my senior year in college in 2012. And so it was really just motivated with, and now as mayor, the motivation is how do I build the community for all kids in Stockton that I wanted to grow up in. And it's even more personal now that I have an 8-month-old son who was born in Stockton, who's being raised in Stockton. I want him to have just a different relationship with the city as a child than I had. I want him to leave Stockton if he wants to, not because he feels like he has to be successful or to have opportunity. And so we're working diligently on that front.
I think that's really great. You know, and I think to your point of seeing a problem and getting involved, I think that's very relevant right now. I think, you know, it goes back to what we were discussing before too. When there is injustice, when there is a problem, you know, people have to get involved. You can't turn a blind eye, especially when it's something so sacred as, you know, equality or whatever it may be, and coming back to a city and wanting to make it, you know, the best possible thing that it can be. And what I think is really interesting and really amazing is you have piloted a bunch of different things here. And what I'd like to talk about is your universal basic income and how that program got started here in Stockton and sort of how you've seen it evolve and, you know, how it's been helpful during this time of crisis with all of the coronavirus stuff.
Yeah, so October 2017, we announced that we're going to do a pilot of basic income. A lot of people thought we were crazy. We spent 2018 designing the program. In 2019, we launched. And essentially, if you go to stocktondemonstration.org, you can find all the details. I'll give a very high level, non-academic explanation. But essentially, 125 people who are representative of the entire city in terms of age, diversity, gender, incomes, etc., have been given $500 a month. And the idea was to test this idea of guaranteed income or basic income. And this idea, I know a lot of people were introduced to it from Andrew Yang, who ran for president. But the idea is old. Thomas Paine was talking about this after the American Revolution. Dr. King is where I learned it from, and he was talking about this in 1967 at another time of civil unrest. And what we've seen is that $500 is not enough to replace work, but it is enough to make work go further or to compensate people for the work that's oftentimes not paid when you do it in your house or if you don't apply it through the programs. Things like caregiving, which is perfect for this conversation, and things like domestic work, which is perfect for this conversation. And we've also seen that in times of pandemics, like I just read something yesterday that said 40% of people who qualify for unemployment insurance have yet to receive their unemployment check, but the bills haven't stopped coming, the need to eat hasn't stopped coming, and these folks are just sitting there waiting, even though they qualified and applied. So I think in this time, particularly when folks aren't able to work, or folks aren't seeing the revenue they're used to, where folks are told to quarantine and stay home for 2 weeks, despite the fact that a lot of people in our country don't have paid time off, don't have a lot of sick days, and 2 weeks is 2 weeks with no pay, half a month with no pay, and most of the country is living paycheck to paycheck. That a guaranteed income is a tool of economic resilience. It allows folks to have a foundation and a floor. So we've seen that giving people money hasn't changed the character of our country. The flag is still red, white, and blue. It hasn't. People didn't start just quitting their job and say, you know what, I'm done working. In fact, people have used the money to apply for better jobs or to get more education, to get a better job or higher paying job. And it's actually made our community, at least for those who are recipients, that much stronger.
That's amazing. It's been really great to watch it sort of roll out and play out. I know it's gaining some momentum too, with the Council of Mayors, I believe. There's some momentum there too, which is really exciting to see. And I think especially, you mentioned, especially right now during a pandemic, so many people don't know where their next paycheck is, but rent is still due. You still have to feed your children. You still have to buy diapers. I think that has been such a poignant demonstration of how far $500 can go, because people need to survive. And so kind of with that theme of this pandemic right now, I wanted to pivot a little bit and talk about that, and see how, from your perspective and your leadership, how we can be the best neighbors to each other during a crisis like this, and really help to kind of get each other through, because things are getting a little bit scary out there, not just here in San Joaquin County, but in California, in Texas, Florida, in a lot of different places, we're seeing numbers surge. So yeah, I'd like to see sort of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, the only way we'll get through this crisis, this health crisis, is in community, and thinking of ourselves less. Particularly those of us that feel healthy and feel invincible. So we have to make communal sacrifices. But the great things about these sacrifices are that they help us too. Like when I wear a mask, even though I'm claustrophobic and I hate being hot and I hate feeling like I can't breathe, and I hate talking through a mask. But I know that in doing so, I am protecting myself and also my neighbor, which is important. So definitely being a good neighbor and also just thinking about sort of, if you're not impacted, if you could work from home, think of all the people who can't, who just so happen to be the same people more likely to be killed by police violence. Black people, Latino people who are disproportionately in essential jobs, who are disproportionately living in multi-generational families who are disproportionately impacted by asthma and diabetes, and we've seen the infection and death rates accordingly. So it's about thinking about how every action I take in general, but particularly during this time where we don't have a cure yet, where we still don't have a national strategy yet, that we have to all take it upon ourselves to exercise leadership and to do at least the bare minimum: wash our hands, wear a mask, social distance, and there's no need to go to a bar right now. Have a bar at your house. There's no need to all like this. We have to be very, very serious about what's going on here, because again, it's a global health pandemic that we haven't seen since 1917. We still don't know a lot about this virus. The virus is still here, and unfortunately, in California, we're doing such a good job. And then as we started opening up, it's gotten out of hand. But that's not just on the mayor or the supervisors or the police or the governor. That's on every single one of us. And the last thing I'll say is, I think part of being a good neighbor is demanding from our leaders to act in the best interest of public health, informed by data and not by angry people and not by personal discomfort. And understanding that livelihoods are important, but the first half of that word is live. Like, we have to be alive. People have to be alive to have livelihoods. And we have to censor that through the prism of any decisions we make in terms of schools, in terms of what's opening, et cetera.
Absolutely. And something that you touched on really resonated with me, as a caregiver, that this notion of sacrifices that we have to make, that, you don't have to go out right now. You don't have to do all of these things. It is something that military and veteran caregivers sort of live with already day in and day out. We don't always ask, generally we don't ask to be put in this position of having to care for an ill or injured veteran, but we assume the task out of love or out of, because that's what we do, and it's how you are a good neighbor or good spouse or good, family member, whatever it may be. And it is that selfless sacrifice in turn that is trying to lift everybody back up. And so I'm really glad you touched on that, because I think that, the caregivers out there who are watching, I think can really identify with that. And it may even be a mild source of frustration for some, specifically some who have, veterans who are homebound or who haven't had the freedom to be able to go and roam around already, and seeing people sort of be a little bit, loose about it can be a little bit frustrating. So it's nice to offer a new perspective for people to understand, the experiences that the veterans are facing, that their caregivers are facing, and just give a new sort of frame of reference for people to understand how important this is, and another, group of people that they are supporting and taking care of by doing those, those simple things like staying home, like wearing a mask, like paying attention to science and data, all of that kind of thing.
No, 100%. And I think particularly for caregivers and for veterans, these are people who fought a war. And no one's asking anyone to risk their lives. We're asking people to actually don't risk your life. Like, we're actually like, do the opposite of what was done. Like, don't risk your life, wear a mask, stay home. And I think we all have to get on the same page. And everyone loves veterans and their families. So do it for the vets. That should be the campaign. Do it for the vets. Bunker down at home.
Absolutely. I like it. I'm all behind that campaign. I'll help you out. Because that's the thing is veterans are among that very vulnerable population by and large. There's a lot of veterans and a lot of caregivers too, who can't go out and bring certain things back because those veterans are so vulnerable. So, I think that is a great point to make. Now, if, Stockton was at the forefront of trying to get ahead of this. I know you did a lot of great work at trying to address this pandemic. If people do start to feel sick, or if they do have, they worry that they were out and they may have contracted this, what do you recommend that they do?
Self-quarantine for 2 weeks if you can. Understand that's very difficult for people who can't work from home and don't have sick time like that. B, get tested as soon as possible. And I know for a lot of cities in California, there's Verily, and actually in this nation, there's Verily Project Baseline that provides free testing. But I think every city at this point has some sort of free testing you can go to, or going and calling your primary physician and doctor and seeing if you can get a test. Or if you have disposable income, you can even buy tests, I think, from CVS, from other sources. But definitely getting tested as soon as possible, because you don't have to have symptoms to have coronavirus. I think that's the part that's tripping people up. I read somewhere that between 40 and 60% or 70% of all transmission are actually from asymptomatic individuals, meaning that if you feel like you've been exposed or you've been around a lot of people, getting tested may make a lot of sense.
That's great. And one of the things that also we've seen a lot through the veteran and caregiver community, and I think across the board has been one of the byproducts of sort of these stay-at-home orders and really trying to hunker down and beat this, is that this isolation that people have been in, whether it's students, whether it's veterans, whether, whomever it may be, we're seeing that there is a lot of issues with, mental and physical health with people who are struggling. So I want to know, maybe how are you trying to stay, physically healthy and mentally healthy, to be at the best, position you can be to help your constituents?
I'm trying to drink my water. I've been intermittent fasting, so about 12 most days. And then I've been doing these coronavirus runs, and I hate running. So the fact that I'm out running even if it's just a mile, you know what I'm saying? I hate running. So run between like 1 and 3 miles a couple days a week, just to kind of keep my head clear, but also the model for the population, for my people, my constituents. Like, no, it's important to take care of yourself during this time, carve out some time to do some breathing work, to rest, to just check in with yourself is super important, because this is difficult, particularly for people who are not just caring for themselves, but caring for others. That's just a lot of outpour, and it's important to take a step back and say, hey, well, what am I doing to take care of myself? You can't help anyone if you're run down, if you're exhausted, if you're tired, if you're sick. So being healthy is probably the most important part of caregiving or leadership. I'm still learning how to do better at it. I'm definitely not perfect, but I think I'm proud of my coronavirus runs and my water drinking during this time.
I think those are excellent steps. One of these days we'll get you out to a Team Red, White, and Blue run, and I don't like to run either.
Once I'm in shape, I can't be out here embarrassing myself. So once I'm able to do it, and I don't have to win, but I can't be at the bottom of the pack, I gotta be like the high mid, I'm in. I'm almost there, but I need a cup. By next year's run, I'll be ready, I'm sure.
Awesome, that's perfect. We'll get you out there, don't worry. I'm a squeaky wheel, it doesn't go away.
Roland tried this year. I said, Roland, I'm not in shape yet. I can't do it.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think what we're going to do now is send it back over to Jasmine, and she's going to share a video that tells everyone just a little bit more about my caregiving story.
So Josh and I met at UC Davis, and he was doing the ROTC program there. And when we graduated together, he was a second lieutenant in the Army. We got to Fort Riley, Kansas, and we were there for about 7 months, and then he deployed. They went on a 15-month deployment to Baghdad. So the unique thing about Josh's deployment is that he had a journalist embedded with him from the Washington Post, and that journalist was able to compile all the stories of the deployment into a book called Thank You for Your Service. And that book was then made into a movie, and that was the first time I really saw firsthand through the movie a lot of the really big things that happened on his deployment. When he came home, we were 24, and we were so excited. You know, he was back, he was safe, he was healthy. By all of our standards, we could see some of the problems that popped up or some of the red flags that came up. We just kind of brushed off to being stress or being, you know, away from home. These invisible wounds, they just grow over time. And when you don't address it, it just gets worse and worse. For a very long time, it took about 7 years before he was able to officially get his diagnosis for PTSD. For a lot of that, it was just not understanding and getting frustrated with each other and not knowing why, you know, he would be so short with me. Or he also gets really terrible migraine headaches that I think is connected with stress as well. Our transition out of the military was unique in that he went straight from active duty to law school full time. And during that law school time, we had 2 small children under the age of 2. It was really busy. He was pretty much gone from 5 a.m. until 9 or 10 o'clock at night. It was really isolating.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. So, you know, that gives a little bit of background for us. I think the thing that stands out to me about, you know, my story, which I can identify with, I think, or a lot of different caregivers can, is that we just didn't know, I didn't know what I was doing was providing care. I didn't realize that I was a caregiver. And I think that self-identification portion is one of the hardest parts, because, you know, we support our service member, and they do their job and they do it so well, and we sort of assume that this is just the life we chose, and so things will just be a little bit harder for us, and we just kind of have to deal with it. And like I mentioned in the video, it wasn't until I saw some of those experiences on screen that I realized this isn't normal. The amount of stress and the amount of work we're putting in, it isn't normal. So I took to the internet and I found the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, and ever since then, it is that thing that makes you feel seen. It's that thing that validates your experience and makes you helps you to understand that there are thousands, millions of caregivers out there who are going through similar things, and that the Dole Foundation was able to cultivate and create this community of support, which has been probably one of the best things for me, because it led me not only to working with the foundation and all the amazing people, and helping to further the work that Senator Dole is so amazingly continuing to do, but it also got me connected with this Hidden Hero Cities and Counties program. And it was great. It was very, very Mayor Tubbs. I found you on Twitter and I tweeted at you, and within, like a week or two, we were emailing back and forth and getting, Stockton signing up and getting on board, which I really appreciate your quick response and sort of that tech savvy part that I was able to find you on. But I wanted to know from you, what about this Hidden Heroes initiative, signing the city of Stockton on, was so important, and what drew you to supporting military and veteran caregivers?
Well, I think like you, I didn't realize the amount of work I saw my aunt do as a primary caregiver, but my mom and grandmother as support. For my grandfather, there was like a name for it and a title for it. And it was something that a lot of people experienced. There was a support for that in terms of military caregiving. So when I heard that, even my staff was like surprised at how quickly I moved on it. And I was like, no. Like this is like my family, like my aunt, she did this for many, many years. And it's hard. And I wish we had known that there was a support network for this, just to have folks to talk to, but also connection to resources and understanding the best way to be supportive, so you're not making it up based off what you feel or your instinct. And then I think particularly in Stockton, veterans are so much a part of our community. We have in our county, we have a high rate of veterans and returning folks, and it's important that I understand we can't do everything, but we do what we can to make sure every part of our community feels seen and feel heard and has something for it that speaks to the specificity of their experience. And then it was also easy, Kelly, because you were here. And I was like, well, I don't have to do it. I could just be supportive. I could just respond. I could just listen. I could just say, okay, let's do, that made it a lot easier. And I think it's your leadership, because if it was up to me to come up to find the foundation, come up with, it just would have been too much. But having a trusted partner with clear passion and experience and competence to lean on and say, well, hey, Kelly, I'm all in, I'm supportive, but you have to be the lead, and I'm here to support you in each and every way. I think that's been super helpful for me. So I wanted to thank you and your team and your family for your leadership, because it's so necessary for our, you've seen from the outpouring of support you get from the community how necessary it's been.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you saying that. And it's been my pleasure. I love it. This is my passion, supporting, veterans and the whole family unit, I think is, something that has been often overlooked. And it's just as important to support, the family members, that whether it's a parent, a sibling, a spouse, and even children. We see the effects of secondary caregiving in children. That to me is worth the passion. It's the same thing we talked about before, in the beginning of this. When you see something and you feel passionate about it, you want to go out and you want to, create the most good you can and advocate for as much of it as possible. So being able to amplify that message with your help has been, a huge source of pride for me, and I'm very, very grateful for everything that you guys have done. Can you share a little bit of some of the initiatives? I know we've worked together on a few things, events and initiatives we've done to support not just veterans, but caregivers too, and some of the things that are happening in our community to sort of come around and support veterans.
Yeah, I think in addition to your work, which I won't take credit for, but say it's been honor supporting, worked very closely with the congressman, with our city, and our county to make sure the VA clinic finally broke ground here in Stockton. It took a lot of conversations around utility plug and like non-sexy stuff no one will ever know. But we got over the hump, got a decision made, and now we're going to have a VA clinic here in Stockton, so our veterans and their caregivers don't have to commute 90 miles, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, spend a whole day getting the care that they so desperately need. Veterans homelessness has become a top priority in terms of the city and county's joint efforts to reduce homelessness. So last year we had a meeting with the county, and I put on the agenda recommendation that we set a goal to end veterans homelessness by the end of my term. So that's something the city and county have agreed to do. There's a project now called Victory Gardens that just got approval from the state, which will provide 100 or 125 units to veterans who are homeless, with land from the county, leadership from Housing Authority, and sort of myself and the city working with the state to make sure all the approvals and things that we needed were necessary to make the project pencil out and come together. And so those are kind of three things that jump right out, and definitely more to come. But focus really on sort of, or also I think the efforts, although not explicitly tied to veterans, it benefits veterans, the efforts we're making around being a trauma-informed city and dealing with the issues of post-traumatic stress and figuring out how do we make sure all of our institutions are educated and trained and understand the signs of PTSD or trauma and how to respond accordingly. So that's going to be an ongoing initiative, but something we've just started, and I'm looking forward to seeing the fruits of that over the coming years.
That is amazing. I was so excited when that press release came through about Victory Gardens. I know it's been a long time in the making, and I'm really happy to hear that it's on the road now. So that's great to hear. So there's currently 9 cities and counties in California who are signed on to this initiative with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, and 154 nationwide. What would you say to other mayors that might be considering this, or that might have never heard of it and would like to know more?
Yeah, I would say that even if you're not personally impacted or affected, there are folks in your community, an untapped asset. I think oftentimes we think of assets, I think of veterans, they have combat experience, they have discipline, they have training, they have time. But I think in addition to that, like the folks who take care of them also are an untapped resource and asset for a community, and it behooves us all, particularly when we talk about issues of homelessness. We know that oftentimes the homelessness epidemic experienced by veterans is because of untreated PTSD and untreated other forms of mental illness, and how empowering caregivers with the tools and the resources and support they need to take care of said people will kind of help with that issue that everyone complains about. So I think that supporting caregivers being part of the foundation's great work is just another way a mayor in the city can provide another resource, another kind of co-partner to push the cities in the directions that we want to see our cities going.
Absolutely. And really, it comes down to being that good neighbor, right? Being that supportive community for everybody in your community, to include the caregiver and the veteran community. Lots of times veterans transition out of the military, and they land maybe someplace that's strange or foreign, and they don't have a whole lot there to connect with. And so I think having initiatives like this that are already built into the landscape of the community, where you work with amazing partners, with people from the Dole Foundation. There's so many amazing fellows out there from all 50 states who would be more than happy to sign on to be able to help out and facilitate this in the same way that I'm doing. I think it brings the community together. Oftentimes people say, well, we support our troops, right? Well, okay, let's think of actionable ways to. And one way is to support the people who are supporting them, which are, they're providing millions of dollars of unpaid care to these veterans. And sort of like we mentioned earlier, they're very isolated a lot of the time, even before the pandemic, even before we were told to stay home. It can be isolating both, physically, but also mentally, because people just don't understand. So the more cities or counties or states that we can get signed on to appreciate sort of that experience and build out the program of support that's already there. So when people come, it's available to them. I think it's great. I think it's a really good way to support the people who have sacrificed so much already for our country, which is, you know, our veterans and their families who are being the support systems start to finish all the way through. So I appreciate, again, your willingness to sign on and to be a part of this. The last thing I would like to discuss with you sort of circles back to the beginning as well about your decision to run for city council as a senior in high school, or I'm sorry, college. I think it is amazing. And I would want to know if you have any advice for anybody who's considering, you know, stepping into that world of politics or advocacy, or, you know, actionable steps people can take to get more involved in their community.
Yeah, I think number one, there's a scripture that says, don't despise small beginnings, because the Lord rejoices in seeing the work begin. So oftentimes the path to being a mayor or a city council member starts with the volunteering, it starts with the cleaning up, it starts with the stuff that no one will ever see, but it helps kind of build the character. And also build relationships so that people want to support you when you decide, like, hey, I actually want to do this. Number two, you have to have really thick skin, and you have to be really focused on the problems or the issues you want to work on, and understand that even if it's not working, the status quo just has a lot of friends because it's safe and it's familiar. And when you shake up the status quo, or you say the status quo is not working, even if people vote for you for saying that, once you actually do it, it's different. So you have to at least have thick skin, but open ears. So your skin has to be thick, but your ears have to be open, because even when people are talking crazy about you, not often, but every once in a while, there's something there that you're like, okay, yeah, I could do that better. And then also, I would say, don't be wedded to a position, but be wedded to a purpose. So I think oftentimes we get frustrated with our political leaders because when they get elected, they don't do the things they said they would do, or nothing happens, and they just have to be elected. And that's because oftentimes people who run, the goal is to get in office and not to do anything. So if you're going to run for office, like, what do you want to do? Because if you don't know what you're going to do, you're going to get in office, and then you've done what you set out to do, and there's no incentive to do more. But so I guess running for office has to be a means to an end, and not the end itself. Like, you being elected just to be elected isn't helpful, and it won't get us where we need to be. We have enough people like that, trust me. But you running because you care about veterans issues, or you care about this or that, that's helpful. That progresses the conversation. That gives you an agenda to work on once you get the seat.
I think that's amazing, and I'm so grateful for, you know, those little tidbits of advice, and I think across the board that's helpful. So again, thank you so much for your time today. I know you are very busy, and I'm grateful for everything that you are doing for our caregiver community, for our veterans, and showing up to support us in this way. I'm so grateful for that. So thank you very much.
No, thank you for your leadership. I think it's important, again, to highlight and note that if you expect one elected official to know every issue and to do everything, you will be disappointed 365 days a year and 366 days on leap years. And oftentimes it takes folks like Kelly taking leadership, doing the research, saying, hey, this is something I've vetted, this is something's a good idea, would you partner with me on it? And that makes it easier to join, easier to support, and the work still gets done. So I just want to thank you seriously for your leadership and for the folks on your team that you work with. I didn't realize you were like a fellow, so congrats on the fellowship. And I think the foundation, and thank you to the Dole Foundation for continuing to highlight Stockton and show that Stockton's a community of people who don't have all the answers, but are committed to working to find them, particularly for those who need it the most.
Amazing. Thank you so much. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jasmine. She's going to name a few lucky winners, and then we'll have a little bit of time for some question and answers.
Are pulling together the winners right now. So I'm going to dive into some questions that are coming in because we have quite a few. The first question here is, how can caregivers get involved with the work that Stockton's doing? And I think, Kelly, you'll be able to answer some of the stuff that you've done. And if you could also expand on that and share some of the initiatives that you put through with Stockton and the foundation. I'd love for you to share some of the great work you've done.
Absolutely. The first thing is obviously go to hiddenheroes.org, get signed up. They have amazing tools on there for understanding the caregiver experience, the journey, everything. It's sort of step one to understanding your role and helping to feel sort of seen in that role like we've discussed earlier. Particularly here in Stockton, we do have a Hidden Heroes Stockton Facebook page. We have a Hidden Heroes Stockton Twitter page. And I believe there's a Stockton caregiver at gmail.com. I'm not sure. We can find that. There's an email for more information that I'll send to Jasmine, and she'll include in the notes. But as far as what we've done here in Stockton, you know, we've rallied with the city. We've worked together with different veteran service organizations to put on some events. We each year, combined with Team Red, White, and Blue and other veteran service organizations, we do Stockton Veterans Week. We were able to host a movie screening of Thank You for Your Service, which Mayor Tubbs was able to be at, and it was amazing. And we were able to get the author of the book, the journalist who was embedded with them, to come out and do a discussion panel after. And also we're trying, you know, we understand that in this really difficult time, we still need connection. So we're trying to host some virtual coffees and sort of resource discussions and things of that nature to really get everybody connected. And the last thing I think I'll say is we work really hard. We have a great support system through the VA, through their caregiver support. The coordinator here in Stockton is wonderful. And for the whole VA system, they have taken a very active role in wanting to work together with us. And for that, we're super grateful, and we're able to reach more people that way.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for that, Kelly. So we have I just want to announce these winners and let you know that we'll be reaching out through your email and be able to send you the prizes and information for this. So our winners are going to be Carrie White, Linda Vaughn, Angelina Young, and Linda Vasquez. We'll be reaching out to you, so don't worry, you don't have to do a thing. We'll send you an email and get all your information. So I'm going to take it back to some more questions here. Somebody told me there's this amazing HBO documentary that's coming out in a few weeks. I would love to hear a little bit more about that, Mayor Tubbs, about this documentary that's coming out that kind of shows the whole evolution of what you've been doing in Stockton. If you can tell us a little bit about how this came about and a little more about the documentary, we'd all like to hear how this happened.
Yeah, July 28th at 9 p.m., HBO is premiering a documentary called Stockton on My Mind. It's a great question around sort of how this came to be. But Mark Levin, the director, approached and said, there's a lot of things happening in Stockton. Stockton is so diverse. We would love to be a fly on the wall for a year and just see and learn about the city through the eyes of the people who live in the city. So the story is not one based in deficits, but in assets. So I'm excited to see the film shared with everyone. I think it speaks to what we love about Stockton, namely the people. It also speaks about the challenges that we're facing and that we're tackling head on, and that we haven't reached perfection yet, but we're making significant progress.
That's amazing. Well, I know we're all super excited to see that. Another question that came in here, can you tell us your thoughts on the importance of voting? Whether it's the presidency or elections, obviously you're a mayor. Can you tell us a little bit about why this is so important?
Yeah, absolutely. Voting is not a panacea for every ill, but it's a powerful tool. And we have to exercise our right to vote, particularly because it's one of the ways we make it clear what our priorities are, what we support, and what we don't. I know Audre Lorde, she says that the quickest way we give up our power is by not believing we have any. And the vote, again, it's not a magic bullet. It's not going to solve every issue, but it is a powerful tool, and it's one by which we can elect representatives that are reflective of our values of a society, as a society.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Another question that came in, actually, this is an initiative we want to share with you. You inspired the Elizabeth Dole Foundation when you talked about doing a 5K. So now we are talking about doing a virtual 5K. Obviously, given COVID, we usually bring all of our Dole Caregiver Fellows to DC for a week where they're able to get training, meet with their representatives. Unfortunately, with COVID, we're not able to do it the same way this time. So we are turning it into virtual and adding a bunch of different programming. So with that being said, we are now going to be doing a virtual 5K for our Dole Caregiver Fellows. That will be in October, Mayor Tubbs, so that should be plenty of time.
I should be able to do a 5K by October and not be embarrassed. I feel fairly confident about that, actually.
Good, because now we're counting on that. And I know we have a lot more questions coming in. Please know we're going to be sending up a follow-up email after this with information of how you can get involved with, as Kelly mentioned, Stockton, her Stockton Facebook page, any resources she has, as well as how you can get involved with our community. Mayor Tubbs, we're so thankful that you were able to be here with us today, and we appreciate everything that you have done. Is there any parting words before I give a closing here of anything that you want to share with our community before we sign off?
Just with deep gratitude, thank you for the work you guys are doing.
Absolutely, thank you. And Kelly, thank you so much for everything you've done. Most of you know if you follow the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, but our Dole Caregiver Fellows are the heart and soul of the foundation. Everything we do is centralize them. They move us, they move our mission. They give us ideas in order to grow our programs, and without them, none of this will be possible. So thank you to every Dole Caregiver Fellow and all the military and veteran caregivers that are out there supporting their community and supporting other caregivers. We appreciate everything that you all are doing. I just want to say before we close out here, we wanted to let you know our Hidden Heroes community page, we're going to be sending information on that. That is HHCC. So if you care for a wounded, ill, or injured service member or veteran, become part of this community. It's really important. It's a chance for caregivers to connect with one another. And this is, isolation is a big issue with military and veteran caregivers. And this group really gives you guys the chance to connect and also connect with our Dole Caregiver Fellows who can help you with any initiatives that you want to have within your community. Also join us for our next C3 episode. It's going to be on Tuesday, July 14th at 2 p.m. And thank you for everyone for joining us here today. A big thanks to our partners at Wounded Warrior Project and the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs for their supporting this important C3 series. We hope you found this session informative, inspirational. Stay in touch with our caregiver community. And always just remember that you're not alone. We hope you all have a fabulous day. And thank you so much again to our wonderful guest speakers, Mayor Tubbs, thank you. Kelly, thank you so much. Like Mayor Tubbs mentioned, we know your career is gonna skyrocket after this, but try to stay in Stockton. You've been doing great work there. But thank you to everybody that joined here today, and we'll be sending a follow-up email with this video so that you can reference back to it. And thank you to the entire Stockton team. There's a lot of behind the scenes that goes into it, so I just want to shout out Roland and Daniel, amazing contributors that do everything with us in regards to the caregiver supports that we do in Stockton and the city. So thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. Bye, guys.